Hello and welcome to this week's IG Live. We are talking today to someone who is a personal friend and also a great friend to read your world. That's Ajanta Chakraborty. And many of you know her through her books and her events. It's Culture Groove Kids. And we're going to be talking to her about all of her books. I have a number of them displayed. This is just a fraction of the books that they have. I also have the one on Holi, since Holi is coming up soon, and also Ramadan and Eid. But she has, hello, she has so many that she books for kids.
Yes, absolutely. My name is Ajanta Chakraborty, and I am the co-founder of a cultural education company called Bollywood and Culture Groove. We are based out of Chicago. I started the company in 2010, so my gosh, it's been a while. And in the beginning, it was only dance classes, but in every dance class that we taught the kids, we never taught them just the moves. We always taught them the stories of the people who this dance would come from. And so every class essentially became like a curriculum, of the region, of the stories and so on. And it was actually my husband Vivek's idea. And he was like, you know what? They shouldn't have to come to your classes to consume the cultural content. We've got to put it out in another way. And that's kind of where the idea of becoming an author even came to our mind. So a lot of people write first, we danced first, and then our writing came later.
I love that. And so I know kind of your larger mission is to raise multicultural kids. And this is all kind of part of that. Why is that something that's so important to you?
I don't think there is another way, right? I mean, the only way you can truly raise kids who can survive in this global world, the world has become a lot smaller than what it used to be, where we used to be sort of in our independent boxes and you didn't necessarily have to interact with others. Now, if you look at any workplace, for example, it's global. You look at your neighborhood, it's global. And the more you get to know about the people around you, the more you develop an appreciation, the better connections you can form, the more you can appreciate them. You can be kinder towards them. I can talk about this forever. But that's kind of why I think that it's so important that every child not only learns about themselves, but also learns about the people around them.
And the thing I love about this is that I think kids who maybe their family comes from India can appreciate this, but it's enough of an introduction that kids that have no background in it at all can also understand it and really enjoy it.
Absolutely. And as when we were writing the books, we really tried to make sure that we were putting ourselves in the shoes of someone who had no idea about India. So it makes no assumptions. Like writing in that way can be tricky because you're like, there's nothing that I can think that they already know. I've got to write in a way so that even if they know everything about India or they know nothing about India, they would be equally engaged in a book. And that takes time to figure out.
That seems like that would be really difficult to do because you don't want it to be boring for those that already have a background, but you don't want to lose
Yeah.
ones that don't know anything about it. How do you find that balance?
So the one good thing about dancing before than writing is that I got so much experience in classes because we were very lucky. Most of the dance companies, if you look at the Indian dance companies, they primarily have Indian customers. But in Chicago, when we started the company, we managed to get almost a 60-40 split between Indians and non-Indians, which is a very unusual. But that gave me the training that I needed on how to speak to a group of kids where everybody has a different amount of knowledge, right? So you write the basic stuff, but you just throw in just the right amount of details for the one so that, and I see this happening in my workshops all the time, is that the ones who know more about India, they're actually very proud of the fact that they know more than the others. And they're kind of like, yeah, like I can tell you more about this after the workshop. And I'm like, yes, this is awesome. So that kind of, all that experience came in really handy when we tried to strike that balance in our
Well,
books.
and just to follow up on that, I saw recently on your Instagram that you had done a class or a workshop where you had different ages, and I think you had to try and figure out how do I do this so that everybody feels engaged. That seems really difficult.
Oh, Absolutely. And thank goodness I've done this for 15 years now. And so I've gotten enough experience. But I remember when I walked in, I didn't know what my audience was going to be. I had second graders, I had seventh and eighth graders, and I had special needs across all the grades.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a real challenge, but it was such a joy.
Well, so I most, if not all, because I do have some of your books that are based on a place like Let's Visit Mumbai. You have one on Indian weddings, but most of them are about a particular holiday or festival. So why is that? Why have you found that as a good way to kind of reach children?
Absolutely. So I think I always describe it in a similar way is that what is your child most excited about the whole year? It's their birthday. Um,
Right.
Celebrations are always the thing that kids get most excited about. It doesn't matter what the celebration is, as long as they're part of it and they get to absorb it, they feel amazing. And that's why we use festivals as such a great way for that looking glass, into the culture, is because it's a fantastic way to learn. When you use that premise of celebration and festivals, everything you throw at them after that, they just absorb it like a sponge because they want to be part of a celebration. And so that's kind of why, so many of our books continue to be about festivals and holidays in one way or another.
Well, and I just want to mention again for those who missed it. So you do have, I think probably one of your most popular ones is the one on Holi, which of course is coming up, and then Ramadan and Eid, which is also going on. Well, Eid's going to be coming up, and I know you have at least one activity book. You have a Holi activity book, and I think maybe another one. I don't remember.
A Diwali activity book as well. Yeah, Diwali book is our highest in terms of just plain sales numbers. That's like the biggest bestseller that we have is Diwali. So we have an activity book for both Holi and Diwali. Yeah.
Nice. And something that you always emphasize in your book, we kind of mentioned before, is that the holidays are celebrated differently in different parts of India. And I was curious, how do you go about researching that? Because I'm assuming you're more familiar with maybe what happens in a certain part of India, but I was always really impressed about how you have, you always make sure to show like, oh, well, sometimes it's here different here and they celebrate it differently in another part of India.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's amazing. Like you only think about this when somebody asks you, and then you realize that something has had such a profound impact in your life. I grew up in a city that was a small city, right? It's not one of the big metro cities, but it was surprisingly cosmopolitan. And the reason is because it's right in the central part of India. And so people kind of from all over the country, came together. And so we ended up with a very, very diverse group of people who were all living in the city together. And what my first education about these festivals and the different ways was literally by going to my friends' houses, because every friend belonged to a different culture of India, spoke a different language from India. And it was such a beautiful mix that a lot of the things that I've learned are actually through that. And you really learn to appreciate the different ways as well. But in our books, we also have to make sure that everything is accurate, right? So just because one of my friends celebrated, it doesn't mean that it's true for that region. And so I do a ton of my own researches. There are scholarly resources that I look at. There are people in India who sometimes I will double check with them and say, hey, is this true? Like, does it sound right? Sometimes I just talk to a lot of the parents as well of our classes, and I'll reach out to them and say, I know you belong to this community. Does this sound accurate to you? Like, I just want to be very, very sure. So I have like so many different resources, and we take it very seriously. We want to make sure the information in our book is accurate. Shockingly enough, sometimes we come up with things that even people in India did not know.
Really?
So there was so in our Holi book, there are a few, other than regular celebration of color and etc. I talk about the different ways, right? And there is one in which they make this like human pyramid, and one person climbs up and they have to get a pot of buttermilk from up top, and whoever gets that becomes the holy king. Not everybody in India knows about this custom. And so there was literally a comment from a parent who posted on our social and said, this is incorrect, this never happens. And I had to actually convince them, even though they are from India. And so yeah, it's a fun process.
Well, and I just want to mention too, I mean, I think the Ramadan and Eid book is a little different just because, obviously that's, most of them are ones that are probably primarily from India, whereas this one is in many different countries. So you do have on that one, you have Eid around the world and some different,
Exactly.
but yeah, that was something I always really loved, especially as somebody who is not from India. I think if you're not, then you don't really realize how diverse India is, which I was kind of wondering, do you feel like you're ever going to run out of festivals to write about? Because it seems like there are so many in so many
Yeah.
different parts. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's one thing people in the US can be very envious about. The number of holidays we have in India for all these festivals, way more than 11, right? And so, no, I don't think I'm ever going to run out. And to your point, I mean, writing Ramadan was such a joy, because people don't realize India has the second highest Muslim population. And again, I go back to my childhood. I grew up in a city that was almost half and half Hindu and Muslims, right? And so I really, really got to see how it's celebrated in India. And there were no books at that time that talked about it. I think there still aren't. And so it was a great way to kind of bring, hey, here's how it's celebrated in India. Take a look, even though it's a global festival. So yeah, I think, yeah, just lots of fun stuff.
And I also want to talk about your latest book, even though we've kind of passed the season of it, but I'm not going to say this correctly, Raksha Bandhan,
You got it.
which is also a little bit different because you guys really emphasize the gender inclusive look at that holiday. So first of all, can you tell people what is Raksha Bandhan? Because maybe that's a little less known than Holi and Diwali. And
Yes.
how is your approach different when you talk about
Yeah. Absolutely. Should be coming up in August, so it should become relevant in a few months. So Raksha Bandhan is a very ancient holiday or festival, I should say. And what happens in that is that the sister will usually tie like a string or a thread around her brother's hand. And in return, the stories have always been, in return, the brother promises to protect and take care of the sister. And uh, and there are many, many like mythological stories that are associated with it. No matter what the story is, the premise is the same, which is that, or at least what happens in like the cultural narrative, like what does the society think of this when they think of this festival? That is what the thought is that the brother will protect the sister. And I'll tell you, growing up, I used to be mad on this day. I was never happy because I'm like, I don't need protection, right? Let's just talk about the sibling bond. Let's take care of each other. Why does one person get to protect the other? And that imbalance in sort of power, if you will, or abilities, if you will, was always something that bothered me. And that's the benefit about being an author, is that if something needs to be written, you can write it yourself. And so when the opportunity came, we've actually been talking about it for a good 3 years since I've been telling Vivek, I'm like, we need to write this. And we finally did it last year. And that's what it is. So in our book, we flipped it. So in this book, we also got to talk about cricket, which is awesome because the World Cup happened last year and all that good stuff. But in this one, essentially, the brother, Neel, gets in trouble, and it's the sister, Maya, who goes and rescues him, right? And it's very intentional to show that we're kind of on an even playing field. Like, let's be loving and caring to each other. We don't necessarily need to say that the brother is protecting the sister and so on. So we intentionally flipped over the story. And it was so shocking to me on how positive the response was, except for a few people. Pretty much everybody was like, we love this. This is already how we talk about it in our families. And that just was so heartwarming for us to see, because we were like, oh my gosh, some people are going to get very mad. Okay. But it did happen. We questioned an ancient tradition and people were like, yeah, that makes sense.
I was wondering about that. I was wondering how people received it. So it's been mostly positive.
Mostly positive. Yes. A few people got a little unnerved. They're like, no, that's not the right way. And I'm like, oh well, got to change with times. And you know what? That's what is needed.
Well, this is something a lot of people were looking for.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I realized that, we've jumped into this, and maybe we should take a step back for those who aren't familiar with the series and just talk about Maya and Neel and kind of what the structure of the stories is. Because even though they're also different, there are kind of some common elements in each one of them.
Absolutely. So there's a girl, Maya, there's a boy, Neel, there's siblings, and the character who's the most popular is Chintu the squirrel.
I knew that.
Yes. Yeah. And sorry, say that again.
I was just saying he's so cute, and that's what my
Kind of.
phone automatically zeroed in on too.
There you go. Exactly. So Maya Neel and Chintu live in Chicago, and then they take these trips. They fly over to India, and every time they go, they have a new, different adventure. And the thing is that it's never on the surface. You know, it's not just like one thing that they learn. It's always whatever the concept is, whether it's a festival, whether it's a place, whether, you know, it's something like wedding, they learn everything about it through the book. But the really challenging part of all of it, how do you not make it sound like nonfiction? It should not sound like an encyclopedia of just facts. And there are a lot of children's books like that, which have wonderful collection of facts, but kids don't get engaged. They don't want so much information coming in that way. And so they're written in a way so that every child still thinks that it's a story. But the truth is they're getting a whole geography, mythology, cultural education curriculum just being presented to them.
And then you also have these sections that info zoom, like you said, for the kids who are ready for a little more detail, but then the main part of it is just a story that you can just read the story part if that's what they're ready for.
Exactly, like grows with them, you know, like as they're ready for more information, well, now you can get into the info zooms and really go to that next level of information. My favorite part is when the kids then start doing their own research. That's what makes my day. I see that happen in my classes. I hear that from the readers. They learned it. They were like, this is great. And then they go and do their own searches and they have their own questions. Ah, it's so fulfilling.
What kind of questions do they come up with? Like, what are some of the big questions or misconceptions or just things that they're curious about?
A lot of the times they're looking for parallels. And that is something that I usually, you know, talk about in my workshops a lot more. Whether it's in person or virtual, like we have a wonderful Q&A section where they want to learn, like, is there anything I already know that is like this? Because kids love those parallels. And so that's one of the things that they're always curious about. They always have a ton of questions more about the mythological part of it. So if I'll present the story, but then be like, but how did this happen? And who does this? When did this start? And who is this person related to? All of like deep questions about mythology, which is always super fun. And then they get into, like I was teaching in one of the schools the other day, and we were talking about a part. And then suddenly they started talking about like the history of India and how the trade was part of it. It's amazing. Like they literally put on their social studies hat, if you will, and they start to kind of think of these social, economic, all of these things. And the kid was barely in like third grade. It's not like they're that old, but my gosh, it's fascinating to see how their mind works.
Well, I think it's also, I love hearing about what you're doing. And I mean, all the events, I know you do corporate events and like you said, workshops, but also the work you're doing at schools, because I think this is something that's kind of under a lot of pressure right now about diversity and inclusion in schools. And that's something that you're really passionate about. So can you say something more about like what kind of response do you get from kids as far as how much they enjoy this kind of content, you know, but why it's so important that we need to keep providing that?
Absolutely. I never thought I would become part of the resistance just by existing. But here we are. So the school work is amazing. I mean, and I speak about this a lot because I also speak at conferences and so on. And I talk about multicultural education. I'm like, it's always like three ways that you do it. One is you introduce literature, make it part of the curriculum, right? And then I talk about how you do that. Second is you make your classroom inclusive. How do you transform the space? And the third important thing is, can you bring in experiences from outside so that they get to experience it firsthand, not just read about it or watch it on a video or whatnot. Can you give them that physical experience or on screen? Virtual is equally effective. I was doing one earlier today, which is why I'm still in my sparkly clothes. But this is why it's so important. They need to be present in an environment where they're soaking that experience firsthand from someone who belongs to that culture and can bring in that perspective, right? I mean, and you have to make it fun. And so I also talk about how you find the right providers for that. Because if your content is not fun and if these workshops are not fun, it lost its point. It has to be so fun that the child talks about it for the next year until they come back again, right? And the response, because of that element of information and fun being just the right balance, it's incredible the experience I get. And I mean, the reviews that people leave, it's just like, I tear up sometimes when I read them because they have so much fun. And one of the favorite things for me to see are the Indian kids in the audience. You should see their faces literally shine with pride because they're like, guess what? I'm part of this culture. You see the person in front of you, you're dancing with her, you're learning with her. I belong to the same group.
Oh.
And I see that happen every single time in every one of my workshops. So it's like, not only did the kid who belongs to the culture felt represented, but the kid who's not just learned something so cool and exciting about some other culture. They're not going to stop right there. Now you've opened up their mind. They want to go explore more. They want to learn more. You kind of like, it's like a light bulb that goes out. So I can talk at length on this, as you can see, but this is why it's important because it's not a one-time learning experience. You're putting them on that learning path again, which is so important for them. And I've been very blessed, like I still have, some of my work has gotten impacted because of lack of federal funding and so on. But by and large, it's still there. Schools are like, we'll figure it out. We'll find the funds to bring you. And I think that's amazing. Hats off to all the people in education right now.
Yeah,
I'm
real testament
very
to
impressive.
how passionate they are about it. If they're still today, they're still finding a way to make it happen. And for anybody, if you haven't experienced it for yourself, you go to your Instagram. You can see all kinds of, like, I was just on there the other day. You can see reviews, you can see snapshots of what you've done, because I think the books, like you said, the books are only part of it. It's like this whole experience. And I know you do virtual workshops. I think, aren't you doing like a library tour coming up? I don't remember exactly when, if you want to give a plug for that, or maybe you can
Yeah,
just talk in general about like upcoming projects, your books or your tour or any of that.
absolutely. The one I did today was virtual. It was a school in California, and I do a K-5 assembly. So they broke the class into 2 groups, and I did both. So that kind of stuff always happens. You won't believe it. The library tour is actually in person. So I'm going to go to Wisconsin 22 times in the month of June. And it's going to be amazing. So if you live in Wisconsin, anybody who's listening to this, they're all free workshops. Yes, it's a fantastic opportunity to experience. So go on my Instagram, you'll find the post about it, because of course I boasted about it. And then the other upcoming project, a lot of it is resources. So what I'm doing right now, for example, for Holi, I literally put together like a list of like 15 resources for Holi. I created a lot of content, but I'm kind of bringing that together. So if you kind of get on my mailing list or whatever, that's the best way, because most of it is all free, right? Like I want people to have, both parents and teachers, to have an easy way to kind of continue these conversations at home and work and so on. So big part of future projects is actually bringing more and more these resource toolkits, if you will, together, and then providing that to everybody. So you're going to keep seeing that on my channel. Hopefully we will write another book as well this year, fingers crossed. And yeah, the virtual work is everywhere. So I have a lot of workshops in Wisconsin that are coming up. And then there is, always some free event that I'm doing somewhere. Like I feel like it's always happening. So social is the best way to kind of keep in touch with all of that.
And you said you have a newsletter also people can sign up
Yeah,
for.
absolutely.
And can you give us a hint about what your next book might be, or are you still
Mm.
don't want to say?
I don't want to give it out yet. Once we announce it, you will be one of the first ones to know, for sure. But I'm not giving that out.
All of you. We'll put it on our stories so you guys can see it too.
Okay.
Oh, this was so much fun to talk with you, as always. Thank you for
Likewise.
everything that you do and for all the support that you have given to Read Your World. We appreciate you.
No, thank you. You guys are doing incredibly useful work. Please continue the amazing work you're doing. The world needs you even more than ever before. So yeah, congratulations for all the achievements you have.
Well, same to you. And we are so happy to get to talk with you and to get to spotlight what you're doing. Anybody, if you're just joining us late, this is going to be up on Instagram in a few minutes, and then of course we'll have it up on our YouTube channel as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.